Welcome to Heilbronn, Don.
Thank you.
I heard that it's not the first time here for you.
Oh, Stefan, my tour partner, says I was at a comic shop here 25 years ago or so, 25 years ago. What, you said you knew the name of it?
I think it was called Magic Planet, but it's bankrupt. It has nothing to do with him that is bankrupt.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Magic Planet.
Welcome. They're all here to listen to you and want to hear something about you, learn something about you. Let's start with that question. You once said it's your manifest destiny to draw one Scrooge story. Why?
Well,
why do you feel it was your manifest destiny?
Something to do with my childhood. I grew up far out in the country. My parents, well, they were pretty wealthy, owned a construction company and had a manse out in far out in the subdivision in the country, far from any other kids to play with. And so I grew up on only my sisters. I had a sister when I was born. She was 11 years older than I was, and she still is. But she hoarded comic books, didn't collect them. There were no comic book collectors with so many American comic hoarders. So she had thousands of comic books dating back to the late 40s. And so I grew up on her collection of comic books, whereas I normally wouldn't have started reading comics or having somebody buy me comics maybe till the early 60s. And of course, just like any reader of comic books in those days, my favorite are the Karl Barks duck stories. Well, we didn't know who they were, but they were some really entertaining stories in the Disney logo comic books published by Dell Comics. So I love those, and but I knew I was going to take over the family construction company when I grew up, because I was highly qualified as the boss's son, and but I still had to go through civil engineering college. I figured out later that because my uncle and father figured I'd meet the sons of the other local building contractors so we could enter into shady contracting deals later in life. But they didn't count on the only thing I would do while I was in school was comic strips for the college newspaper and watch old movies on TV and collect comics. But so I grew up, I still loved, I'd tell people about how much I loved the Karl Barks comics. And I would write stories for fanzines that in my mind were Scrooge adventures, but I had to create my own characters to put in them. And so I just always felt that, seriously, it was my destiny, but not to do it for a living, to create one Uncle Scrooge adventure. And and these comics had disappeared from America as of now, like half a century ago. Americans now for 30 or 40 years have never even heard that Donald Duck comics exist anywhere. They think he's a t-shirt in Disney World. But a little company popped up in Arizona. It was started by some friends of mine, comic book collectors that I knew, and they were the only company in North America interested in the license of Disney Comics because nobody else wanted it. And so they started reprinting old Karl Barks and Tony Strobel and John, all the old Dell Comics. And I called up the friend of mine who was the editor, Byron Erickson, who worked for Egmont, I guess still does. And I literally told him that it was my manifest destiny to create an Uncle Scrooge adventure. I knew it my whole life, but just one. And he said, I remember he said he couldn't argue with manifest destiny, so he let me do it. And I owe a lot to this guy, and we'll get to that later. But Bruce Hamilton, who was the publisher, the main director, looked at my work and could see how crude it was, and he said, no, just pay him off and fire him. But Byron stood up for me. He said, this guy's got something in there somewhere. And he said, either if I'm the editor, I'll quit if you don't let me do my job. So it's because of Byron that I finished that story, and I just had to get it out of my system. It was actually a story I'd already done with my own characters in the college newspaper when I was supposed to be studying thermodynamics and mechanics of deformable solids. And that was done. Then I was going to go back to doing full-time figuring jobs for the Kino Rosa type. Yeah, it was a ceramic tile and terrazzo company my grandfather started around the turn of the previous century when he moved to America from Magnago, Italy, at the foot of the Alps in Italy. But then that first story was nominated for the first Harvey Awards, which predated the Eisner Awards for comic books. And well, I figured maybe I'll do another one and another one. And about 6 months, I just liquidated the company and decided I'd fulfill my manifest destiny. And my wife was a teacher. That's important. So I knew she'd take care of me, because I went from making a really nice income to, well, pretty poverty level. But she had a steady job and had insurance. So that's. But it's because that was the passion of my childhood, was to create adventure stories like Karl Marx did, funny adventure stories, which were also like old movies to me. Good adventure movies are a combination of great adventure and a touch of humor. So anyway, that's how and a lot of wishful thinking, I guess. I thought was my manifest destiny.
Yeah, there's a fly, but we don't get disturbed by it. Actually, there's a circle now, because here in the exhibition is a story that's called Thanks for the Memories, which was just recently done in honor of your 75th birthday. And it was written by Byron Erickson. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah. He told me he had written something, and I was going through a period in my life where I didn't reply to him right away. And when I finally read it, and he'd even and I said, that's very sweet, and I said, I hope you weren't waiting for me to approve it. It's not my job to approve what. But he said he'd already had it. He'd already finished writing it, and it had already been drawn by Errol. And then actually I didn't hear back from him after that, and I wasn't sure if, that it would be published, but sure enough, right about the time of my 75th birthday in June, I started receiving they've been sending me all the weekly Egmont comics for 35 years now. And but that's interesting. I like to see what's going on. I can't read them, but see how they change over the years. And it's an awful lot of trouble to open up those cellophane wrappers and separate the paper from the two different recycle containers, because I donate them to a library or something, but they're these foreign languages. But he sent me the script for it, like I said earlier, and the art. And that was just so sweet. And the first part of the story, I guess, I guess the general readers of the weekly wouldn't really quite understand it, but he showed that I think Byron was my editor at Egmont the whole time, and these were maybe his favorite scenes in the stories, which kind of were intriguing to me that he liked those particular scenes. But then in the last 3 panels, he has Scrooge thinking that somebody should tell his life story. He said he wasn't experienced enough to do it, but he should maybe contact somebody who could write. And if he wrote his adventures, Scrooge's adventures, whoever that was would become world famous. So he's giving me a clue to. I think the way I saw it, he was complimenting himself also, because he's the one that was my editor. So he was responsible for some of my best stories. It's because he told me to throw away the script that I first wrote and do it better. And he would tell me to write it and make it more dramatic. So, which is the way I wanted to do it, but I didn't think he'd accept it. So in the last 3 panels, he started telling my story without naming me, but it was just real sweet. He said, I think the second to the last panel, he said, and maybe this guy will think it's his manifest destiny to tell my story. And maybe in the last panel, he says, and he can write my life story, the life of Scrooge McDuck. And I would, since I'm in Germany, I guess I should mention, and maybe this mystery would be solved, but I've got copies of the Norwegian and Danish and Swedish and Finnish Egmont weeklies, and those were all translated. It took me a long time, but I wanted to see the last 3 panels to feed it into the Google Translate, all this strange wording, and they were like word for word. They copied over the tribute to me very nicely, but the German edition, whoever the translator was, he completely blew it. There's no tribute to it at all. And I don't, I always had trouble with translators. People would think, I guess I'm just an arrogant writer, but I think a translator is supposed to translate what the script the original author is, because that's already been edited by somebody, by Byron. He doesn't need to be edited again by the translator, but some translators want to express their own creativity, so they change it completely. I don't know if that's what happened here. I don't know, maybe while I'm in Germany.
That's a tradition here actually in Germany with the Disney comics.
To completely obliterate the plot of the story?
Yeah, a bit.
What a shame. But that's one of the, not to be too serious, but I quit 18 years ago for a number of reasons. I think we might, I think one of your questions you showed me would be a very sweet reason, sort of, that I quit. But that's one of the reasons I quit, is I had no control over the presentation of my work, which I really put my heart and soul into. As crude as the artwork was, I really worked hard on that, and sometimes it was colored wrong and lettered wrong, and the sound effects were pitiful.
And translated wrong.
But that's Egmont. And they're much better now, though, I really admit. They have realized that comic books is an art form, and a proper presentation of comics, people notice, people who are smarter than the editors from 35 years ago. I remember the Norwegian, one of the associate editors in Norway, was when I'd visit there, we were talking about the comics fans who were coming to see me, and this guy said, you know, don't pay any attention to those freaks. They don't know what they're talking about. I think, this guy's calling me a freak because I'm a comics fan like them. But that's their attitude then. But now they realize there's a profit to be made by correct presentation of good comics.
So you're a fan?
That was a lovely tribute from Byron.
You're a fan, you're a comic book artist, you're a storyteller. What is the best characterization for you?
Well, I would, I guess I'm an artist. I always thought when I was a kid that only one person created comics, that both wrote and drew his own work. So I knew I had to do that. But the duck stories I would always, when I would travel around for Egmont promoting their comics for them, I knew I was supposed to be on a promotional tour, like an author or a movie star saying, oh, you should see this new movie or read this new book, it's my best work ever. And I just couldn't do that. I'd give interviews, I'd tell the reporters or on the TV shows, well, I did a story of these characters and it's about this, and that might be okay if you see if you like it. And the publishers, the editors would say, well, why don't you ever brag about it? You're too modest. And I said, well, they asked me the right question. They feel like they'd find out I'm not so modest. If they'd say, don't you think your comics are entertaining? I said, oh, you're damn right they're entertaining. Because I put every ounce of strength I can. I put, like, instead of just 7 panels a page, I'll put at least average of 10 panels, and I'll fill the word balloons with too much dialogue, and I'm just having the time of my life. So I don't know if that makes me a storyteller or an entertainer. I just loved what I did. And that's we were talking about, I was puzzled for a long time why my work was so popular when people, like really great professional artists, I never felt like a professional artist, cartoonist, because I never studied, I never practiced, I just did it in my spare time. I wondered why it was so immediately popular. It wasn't just, it didn't take years, it was immediately popular. And now, in later years, I realized because there's a big, like, internet activity with fan art. Mine was I'm a fan artist. I always have been, and that's as high as I ever wanted to attain. You can tell I'm having a good time. And I think that's what the readers, I think they looked at my art and they could look at it, and I guess people were thinking, for somebody to obviously put so much effort into such bad art, he's having a great time, and they enjoyed themselves with me. So I don't know what that would make. I'm a fan artist.
We disagree on that part of the ugly art, obviously.
Well, you talk to art directors and it's the one thing I know that Disney can't really interfere in Egmont's business. I think that would be probably actionable, but they did order, they couldn't stop me once I got so popular, but I think they can't tell Egmont to fire somebody. They know they're putting themselves in a very dangerous position, but they did tell, and I've known this for decades, they said, okay, you've got him, but no more Don Roses. We want people that draw cute ducks and tell nice little stories for kids, and we don't want any more of this strange artwork, which they were saying they didn't want any more fan artists. So, okay, what?
Okay, I consider you as a great storyteller. I consider you as a great entertainer in your stories.
Yeah.
So you're addicted to stories. Of course, Karl Barks. Is there a favorite story from Karl Barks for you?
Karl Barks?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. When I grew up literally from birth on my sister's comics, I think I outgrew them even sooner than most people, kids do. And I think I remember when my sister moved away from home, and for the first time I pointed to the comic books on the stands that I wanted, but of course it would be a Donald Duck, and I read it, and it just wasn't very interesting. I mean, it was a Donald Duck comic. Now I wasn't aware that, the artists, I just know it was a boring comic, but by that time Barks was doing Uncle Scrooge comics, or he was still doing the, if you're familiar, and I'm sure some of you are, we had Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, which these were just monthlies or bi-monthlies, never weekly. Wow, what a concept. It did take a whole nother interview of what it was like for me to visit in 1990, I think, when they first invited me over here, an entire continent of duck fans just like me. And I thought that these things had, like I said, they'd gone out of business in America around 1970, the late 70s. And here was a whole continent of duck fans. So there was, I figured, well, I'd outgrown these, so I got rid of all of them and started collecting some other kind of comics, Superman comics, I think.
Actually, you have one of the biggest collections in the world, right?
In America, I don't know, but it's just because I started back at 1962 and never got rid of any of them. I mean, they were less than $1 a piece, which was a lot for a used comic. They usually should be a nickel a piece. But I amassed them real quick. But anyway, I kept two. I had to keep two of my sister's comics that I couldn't bear to part with, just because of the brilliant stories by whoever was doing this. One was The Golden Helmet, which was in a Donald Duck issue, and that's the one with I thought this was actual history. It was so vivid, and it's such a great adventure story. And the artwork, and I couldn't get rid of that. I hid it in the back of a drawer. And the other one was my really favorite, was a story called Only a Poor Old Man, which was the first American Uncle Scrooge comic, after Barks had created Uncle Scrooge about 5 years earlier and had become so popular that Dell decided, not Disney had nothing to do with it, Dell decided to give Uncle Scrooge his own title. And Barks was pretty much not somebody who thought he was creating masterpieces. It was just, he had the great American work ethic, which is dead now, but in those days, that was people who would do whatever their job was to the best of their ability and have pride in it, even if it was something as embarrassing like working for comic books. He, like most cartoonists, he wanted to do newspaper comics, but that was money and good reputation. But I think he appreciated that he was his a character that he created without any Disney interference or help had become so popular, and the very earliest issues of Uncle Scrooge were done on a very, well, and also an adult level, both for, you know, for children and adults. And that was such a dramatic story, and it also, like the Golden Helmet, reminded me of the old movies that I enjoyed all the time as a kid. And it still has the panels like the dam breaking, I don't know what the name of the story is in German, but is the dam breaking at Money Lake, which I think is the most action-packed panel in the history of comics, better than any full two-page spread that Jack Kirby could ever even imagine. And also it had one of the most dramatic panels I've ever seen in a comic, and certainly in a duck comic or a Disney quote-unquote comic, was at the end of the story when Donald and the kids have just helped him for one of the first times protect all of his money, and they're walking away counting their 30 cents an hour, gonna go buy sodas, ice cream sodas, and Donald turns around and says, you know, Uncle Scrooge, you may think you're the richest man in the world, but for all that money, all the worry it causes you, you're just a poor old man. And then there's a panel that Barks draws, and Scrooge is just like this, and you can see he's thinking, maybe he's right. But then he says, bah, no man is poor who can do what he wants to do once in a while. And that's where the first time they use that line. He says, and I like to dive my money, and his money was right there, but just the dam had broken. He said, I like to dive in my money like a porpoise, burrow through it like a gopher, and the last panel he said, toss it up in the air and let it hit me on the head. Now, this is not gold coins. That's the worst. This is something I try to sneak in any interview I give. A really terrible misinterpretation of Barks's most basic intention was ruined in the very first European use of his stories, and it's become traditional. Well, every place outside of the United States, the money bin was never meant to be filled with gold. That completely misunderstands the whole point of it. It's not valuable coins. Scrooge is not miserly, he doesn't love gold, he's cheap. He's just cheap. He's not greedy, he's cheap. And he's got an entire 3 cubic acres of just pocket change, pennies and nickels and dimes. That's funny. A whole bin full of gold coins is stupid. There's no point to that. There's no characterization. There's no, so, and that's the beauty of it. And that's, I think, is one of the great sequences in comics. I think pretty soon after that, maybe 5 or 6 issues, the editor said, you know, well, they'd already had to suffer through the 4 pages. You got one of them over here that were censored out of his Back to the Klondike story about the dance hall floozy who drugs him and rolls him, as they say, and then he has the big barroom brawl, and so he already knew they were going to crack down eventually. So after about the first 5 or 10 issues, they were still great, but they just didn't have that adult emotion laced through it very carefully. And mentioning, that's another thing. That was a great moment, in my life when back around 1968 or 69, when I first found out there were other comic book collectors in the world who, you know, traded old comics and wrote about somebody. Well, everybody in those days it was only the late 60s, and Barks had just quit, had just retired. So all the comic book collectors that were left, they were, you know, Barks's Duck comics are the best-selling comics in American history by far. I mean, no matter what the people tell you about the Spider-Man and Batman comics they have, those are terrible sellers. There's hardly any comic book readers left in America. There's comic book buyers and investors, but just people who enjoy comics. When I was a kid, Uncle Scrooge comics sold 3 million copies an issue. That's in the mid-50s. So what should they sell now? 10 million, 20 million copies an issue? No. Batman and Spider-Man sell 100,000. And most of those are just bought for investment or the stock of comic book stores. So
so you never buy a comic book that is costing you more than the cover price? You're not buying a comic book that is more expensive than the cover price for your own collection?
Oh yeah, I had back in, when I first found, I was talking, oh no, but I was talking about there were other Marx fans, and so somebody out of the blue sent me the 4 censored pages, because there were people who had met Karl Marx and who probably lived in his hometown and found out who he was and visited him, and he'd just give them artwork. And he gave somebody the 4 censored pages out of Back to the Klondike. So somebody sent me black and white copies of those. And that was an epiphany. The character I already loved was a bigger hero than I could possibly imagine, like a character out of old adventure movies. But I mentioned it because you've got it's not the original, but it's over there, a copy of that art. Well, okay, what question was I answering when I got onto that? Oh, wait a minute.
We were starting with
cover
Only
price.
a Poor Old Man, and then we went to the cover price of the comic books.
Yeah. Well, I was paying a little more than, they were a dime a piece back in the 50s, and very quickly I replaced all my sister's Dell comics that I got. Those were real cheap. They were funny animal comics. Of course, Marx's weren't funny animal. Daffy Duck was a funny animal. He was naked, and he flew around up in the air, and hunters shot at him. But I always knew when I was a kid, Donald and Scrooge were people, just drawn a certain way. I didn't see them as talking animals or ducks. They were people. The comics, I'd pay 50 cents a piece for them, and I'd buy them by the hundreds. I was a collector. I wanted to build sets. I didn't know they'd ever have value, but now I still collect comics. Like, I still don't have quite a full set, but I collect just about everything after World War II on. But the ones that I bought for 50 cents a piece then, if I want to, a few of them are a little rough and I want to replace them, but I'm not going to be able to get them for 50 cents or even a full dollar. The cheap ones might be $800 or $900, and the ones that investors fall in love with might be $60,000, and these are just run-of-the-mill horror comics, or it's not much fun. You have to compete with somebody who has no interest in the product, the same way people put money in the bank and buy certificates who have no interest in the certificate. They just know it's worth money, and that's where they might be listening. Let's not talk about something else in the value of it.
So aside of comic books, what do you collect? Because I know you're a big collector of everything.
Well, that's something that was in my genes. Ever since I was a little kid, I just collect lots of things. Collect what else do I collect? Old movies. I still love old movies. I've got thousands of new movies too. It's just that movies made after 1965 are made for a completely different reason than a good storytelling. It's just to make money. They have nice special effects. They're chewing gum for the eyes. But only maybe 5 good movies made after 1965 that I really like.
For example, tell me one.
Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
I love that. Mm-hmm. Especially when one of my best friends had just seen it, and he came and told me that. I think I'd already seen it, and he said, "I just saw a movie that I would believe that you wrote, if you actually," and I said, "Oh, thank you," because it's complicated and it's funny and it's adventurous. I don't know what else. I don't want to talk about movies. I'll take away this whole interview and talk about movies. What are the other?
What's the last movie you've seen? Just to close that.
Last new movie? I don't know. 10 years ago.
No, I mean, what's the last movie you actually saw?
Oh,
like
I watched
yesterday.
King Kong today.
King Kong.
I was showing it to somebody else. That's like one of the 5 greatest movies ever made.
The old one from the 30s.
Of course, the new one's garbage. The new one exemplifies, even though Peter Jackson did the great Lord of the Rings movies. I like those. But his King Kong movie is an example of the worst American action movies now. It's so preposterously overdone, and it has none of the charm of the original, which was all done by hand. No special effect. Everything you see on the screen is real. Miniatures and photographic effects, things combined. like one view in King Kong would show you a live action corner of a waterfall. It's some actual waterfall. The background is a painting, and then in the foreground you see something from the studio with the live action people running through it. It's an amazing thing. And movies like Citizen Kane, although I'm glad they didn't make lots of movies like Citizen Kane, because that's the uniqueness of how great that is would be spoiled.
Well, and we all remember what you did with that. With the Citizen Kane, we all remember what you did in your life.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten.
Fantastic page.
Yeah, I worked that into, although it's a completely different character. Citizen Kane is the opposite of Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge McDuck worked for every penny, and Citizen Kane, his whole problem was it was given to him. But it was irresistible to compare them, their old age, where Citizen Kane mentioned the one meaningful thing in his life was his sled that he had as a child, and nothing else after that meant anything really. And Scrooge says, Goldie. Okay, now I don't want to talk about that anymore because I'll get choked up, because that really, and that leads to the one thing I did want you to, you showed me a list of the questions, because there's certain things I don't want to discuss, and I just crossed out one, I think.
And now he wants to talk about it.
But you say what was, I'll let you ask the question. You said, what was my favorite story of my own? Go ahead and ask.
Yes, actually I wanted to know which is the story from yourself that you still appreciate and think, I did this job quite well.
That's a good question.
He's too humble usually to speak about that, but...
No, I did, towards the last story I created was called The Prisoner of White Agony Creek, and it was another additional episode in the life and times of Scrooge McDuck. And I knew I was having lots of reasons I didn't think I wanted to go on in this. It was so frustrating working in that system, and my eyesight had a retinal detachment, and I couldn't see well anymore, and there was lots of problem with translators and the poor presentation. But one of the main reasons was I did this story called The Prisoner of White Agony Creek, and there's no sense in describing the plot, either you know which one I'm talking about or not, but I knew that I would never create another story that was about Scrooge and Glittering Goldie, which, like I said, the most important thing in his life. I would never be able to create another story that I loved as much as I loved that story, so I quit. And I'm glad I did.
But that wasn't the end, because at the moment, or since that time, you're traveling all over the world, meeting your fans and sitting
pretty
there
much
for
when
hours.
my happy life began, when I quit that thankless job, and I met Stefan, and I've been very successful since I have been completely unemployed for the last 18 years, and just travel around and meet duck fans, and we go to shows and conventions and comic shops, and Stefan will sell prints, but there's never anything, no purchase is ever necessary. People can come and stand in line, and they don't have to buy a thing. They can bring stuff from home. And I love to give autographs, free autographs, and talk to duck fans. That's what I live for. And Stefan, we do okay. And I'm real proud that nobody has to buy a thing. And I hope I can go on doing that as long as I can. I feel like I can. I still feel like I'm...
Well, 75 years and still going, right?
Well, I can't last forever. I still feel I keep really busy taking care of my I don't know what an estate. It's not a farm. I don't raise, and it's not a ranch. I don't raise cattle. I raise basset hounds, or at least but it's a lot of work mowing all that grass and so on. So far, I still feel like I'm 20, except this one area right at the hip right here sometimes, but still do okay. And I sure hope, because this is what I live for, traveling around and living in that nice log house there by myself. I hope I can do that. Yeah, I never get tired of meeting duck fans.
I'm curious, is there a question you were never asked in an interview but always wanted to speak about?
I think that's one of the ones that I didn't want you to ask me. It's a good question, but I think I'd have to study on that.
Well, I'm sitting, they're sitting.
At first, I'd have to think of a funny answer before I could give you a serious answer. So, no, that was when I thought I was going to ask me another one. That's difficult to think of. Oh, yeah. Did you plan on doing questions from the audience? I love to do that. People will, when I get invited to a show, they say, and today and on Thursday or whatever, you're going to get up and give a talk. And I said, I don't give talks. I don't presume to tell people what they want to know. But if you put me on a stage and get answers or questions from the audience, one person will ask one question, and I'll go on for so long that he'll say, "Okay, wasn't that interested." But so I don't know if we have.
Let's take this for granted. So if he invites you, does anybody here has a question to
you pick
over there, left? Yeah, beard, glasses. No, sorry, before the beard and the glasses, it's the young lady.
What would have happened? What, to Scrooge and Goldie?
No, in general.
What?
In general, what would you have done next as a story? Was there an idea in the back of your mind?
No, because like I say, I think I was ready to quit for lots of reasons, and I kept a list of stories over the years, and I don't think I had any left. But I just didn't want to work in the system anymore. It was soul crushing. I just loved to tell stories. That was like my life, not to get corny. And that system destroyed my enthusiasm for telling stories, and started to destroy my enthusiasm for all the intricate work I would do, because sometimes it was useless. They'd color it wrong, I'd be embarrassed by how they lettered it, so I quit at the right time. Ever since I quit, I knew it was the right decision. Stefan knew me before that. He says, "Oh, you were so depressed before that," and he said, "Now you're much happier." So I don't know I have no idea. No, I didn't have any plans, unfulfilled plans.
So no story in the drawer. No story in the drawer to take out. All told. Another question over there, please.
What was the inspiration to write Kalevala, like the Finnish story? What's the inspiration?
What was the inspiration that I did the Kalevala, which was, or a story based on the Kalevala? I'd been to Finland a number of times, and at the time, those were the biggest duck fans in the world. I'm not sure why. I think it's, of course, because they were Barks fans. And Barks, one quality of Barks is he had kind of a unique sense of humor, different from all the other writers. And the Finns have a unique sense of humor, and I guess I have a unique sense of humor, so I was extra popular there, but only because the ducks are more popular. And so in the 5th or 6th visit, somebody said, "You know, if you combine the two most popular things in Finnish culture, which is the Kalevala and Donald Duck, you'd be elected president of Finland." So I thought I'd do that, because Donald Duck, they tell me, every year gets tens of thousands of votes. Every election gets tens of thousands of votes to be president of Finland. And they report it because it's a big joke. It's funny, it's cute, people are just being funny or protesting something, I don't know. And then they had the next election, and all I know is they didn't report the write-in votes. They didn't report him for a change. So, but I don't want to be president of Finland. But that was fun. I went there, and I'm always popular I've seen popular when I visit countries. And it's so surreal that I always think, I'm nobody in America, and I come to Europe, and I'm like a rock star, and I think entire countries are playing a practical joke on me. And I was saying, let's make him think he's this famous. But now let's see, what was I? But no, I wasn't elected. But that was an exciting trip. the most famous person in an entire country for a week. Front pages of all the newspapers, and gosh, that was fun. And I could go on national television. They'll put me on national television. Egmont would, because they're using me for promotion to sell their comics, which I didn't get royalties on, but I was just thrilled to be there talking to Duck fans, and they'd just say, but they'd put me on national television, and my wife might see it on, I don't know, where would she see it? On YouTube or something, and you're so relaxed. You're on national television, you're just, yeah, I don't take it seriously. It's like it's a dream. I couldn't go on Johnny Carson or David Letterman, that's real. But it's just surreal to be suddenly go to another country and treated like people recognize me on the street. I'm sitting in the airport, the pilots walk up, the pilot of the aircraft wants my autograph, then go home again, and my neighbors don't even know who I am. So I've lived these, Karl Marx's comics enabled me to live the most wonderful life anybody could ever live. Money, never much money in it, that's not important. It's just been a wonderful life. And I used to think, after I was starting to do this, that imagine that I was at some impossible reception and with many famous people, and somebody walked up to me with a glass of wine and said, "I'm the personal doctor of the Queen of England." And I would say, "That's nothing. I write and draw Uncle Scrooge adventures." That's how much it meant to me to do that.